All right, so we know the Helix works well with one instrument at a time, but how about two or more? It does. Let's go check it out. Okay, so we've got the back of the Helix here. As you can see, I'm on the Helix LT. Doesn't matter if you're using the full Helix, the LT, or even the Stomp, you can still do all of this. So what we are interested in here is the guitar in and then the effects returns. It's just like a tube amp or an amplifier that has a effects loop. You can actually use that loop as another input. First option we could do is plug your guitar straight into the main input. If you want to run a second guitar, for instance, we can plug it into return 1. One thing that this will cause is, or a couple things here, if you want to use your tuner, for instance, it'll work for either one, but only one at a time. So you have to go in and manually switch which one you want it to work for. To get around that, we can actually plug both instruments into the return. So you have one going into return 1 and one going into return 2, and then set the tuner on the inside for return, or the effects send in return, and it'll work for both of them. The downside of this is if you're running a setup that uses the guitar impedances, you can't switch that for the effects loop. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then also with this, we can run a third instrument since we have one more input here. So if we have all three, it's going to be like this. So for instance, this could be our electric, this could be our acoustic, and this could be like a ukulele. Instead of setting up 3 different patches, I just have all 3 of them plugged in like this, and I can turn them on individually as I want to. So let's head on over to HX Edit, and I'm going to show you how to set all this up. Okay, so we've got a blank preset set up here, as you can see, and the first block here is your input. So the multi is what it defaults to, and the multi and the guitar allow you to access the impedance, which is this guitar in-Z feature. So you can set that to change your input impedance to whatever you want. If you're using that feature, you need your setting or your input set to one of those, because the return does not have that feature. So that's just something to keep in mind. The easiest way to set up multiple instruments, for instance, if we're using 2 instruments, is to have the top roll set as one instrument and the bottom set as another instrument. And then that way they both have their own dedicated path and nothing can get confused or anything like that. You could even set it to where they have their own outputs if you wanted to do it like that, or you could pan it. The other way you can do it is, we're going to set this back to none, is you can have both inputs up here at the top. So we have to have some kind of block so we can pull this down. So we'll normally put a gain block if I don't have anything else in the path already, so we can pull that down. And then we want to pull this first one down, and then you have 2 inputs. The first one we're just going to leave it as input, and then the second one we're going to put it as return 1. That way, for instance, this top path we're going to make an electric guitar, and the second path we're going to make an acoustic guitar. It doesn't matter how you want to, or what kind of instrument you want to do. If you wanted 2 electric guitars, that you could do the same thing. But doing it like this allows us to come over here to the output block and route it to path 2A, so we now have our full DSP power unlocked for both guitars, or both inputs. So again, this first one we're just going to put a random cab or random amp, and the second one I'm going to make just an EQ block, just so we can tell the difference between the two. So the way I like to set these kinds of things up is to mute the instrument you're not using. There's a couple of ways we can do it. The first way, you can come over to this little split block and you can set the levels, the A level and the B level, to snapshots. And doing it like that allows you to change that for each snapshot you're on. You can also do that same thing with these gain blocks if you wanted to. I'm actually going to delete that because we don't need it right now. So let's do it with this mixer here. So for snapshot 1, we're going to call this electric in just a minute. So we're going to take level B all the way down, so it's muted. And we're going to leave level A up, so that way the signal still goes through, but it mutes the acoustic signal. So let's save this and call this electric. And then we're going to switch over to snapshot 2, and we're going to do the opposite. We're going to pull this one back up, and then we're going to pull level A down, and again save it. And then we're going to call this one acoustic. That way, like I said, whenever we're on our electric, it automatically mutes the acoustic, and when we're on our acoustic, it automatically mutes the electric. Then doing this, we have this whole second row unlocked, so we can add some effects. It doesn't really matter what we add for this particular demonstration here. And then just put one more. So doing this, we've got a shared chorus, delay, and reverb between both instruments. I'm actually moving over. You can set these up for snapshots as well, so each setting that you want for each instrument you can change for each snapshot, or you can just leave them how they are and they just share the same settings. One advantage to setting it up this way as well is we now have access to the looper for both instruments, because if we have just the instrument being separate, so one instrument's on the top and the other instrument is on the bottom, we can only add one looper block, so you can only put the looper on one instrument. This way it allows you to put it on both, and then again we can assign these to our foot switches. That way we can turn them on and off at will, and then if you have your Helix set up for snapshot mode to be on the foot switches, for instance on mine I've got it set up to where they're on the top roll. Our top roll will change our snapshot, and the bottom roll can turn on effects. Now if you wanted to add a third instrument, we can do that. I'm going to copy this EQ block, pull it down, and again same thing we did at the top. I'm going to pull that down, and then we're going to pull this down so we get our third input. Oh, sorry, I gotta click on that. And then we're going to put this as return 2, and then don't forget to pull this over in front of your effects so you have all three going into the shared effects here. And then the same thing applies down here with this mixer. So you have your A level, which in this case now is both the electric and acoustic, and your B level is the third instrument. In this case we're going to make this a ukulele because I teach all three on Zoom, and this is how I normally would set it up for Zoom. So for this, again, we want the snapshots. I guess technically it doesn't matter for that one, but we're gonna take B all the way down and save it because we're still on acoustic. Switch back over to our electric, do the same thing, mute it, save, and then switch over to 3. And if you're wondering how I'm switching, I'm using a Mac, so I'm hitting Command 3 or Command 2 or Command 1, and it switches to the snapshot you're using. We're going to call this ukulele, and we're going to mute A, and then again save it. So this way we have our ukulele coming in return 2. We have separate EQs for your acoustics and then your amp for the electric. And the the ukulele is coming in and just running straight through your effects. And then we can go back to acoustic and it mutes everything except for the acoustic. And then same thing for the electric, it mutes everything except for the electric. And save. And doing it this way again, or if you wanted to, for instance, like blend in an IR or something, you can do that for each thing as well. What I'll usually like to do for the 4th snapshot here is just call it a mute all. And then just come over and we're just gonna take A and B, which I guess I technically don't need to do that one. You can just do it here. But just mute everything, that way in case something goes wrong or your battery dies on something, or I don't know, some kind of problem happens, you can just hit that button and it mutes everything, so you don't have to sit there and freak out. But this way, setting it up all in one preset allows you to have all 3 instruments plugged in and be able to access the effects that you need just with one button and mute everything else that you're not playing, rather than having to unplug cables and plug them back in, or go in and manually route each of your presets to each of your different inputs like that. Or if you needed a bigger preset where you needed more effects for each instrument, you could do it like that. For instance, you could have one preset that's all electric, one preset that's all acoustic, but make the input return 1 or return 2, or whatever you want to do it, a different return than your electric. And then the 3rd instrument, you can make a 3rd preset and then have it as return 2. All right, as I said in the setup, this setting works really well for teaching setups where you have multiple instruments needing to be accessed really quickly and not have a lot of hassle plugging in different things. Or it also works really well in live situations where if you're in a band or at a jam session or something like that, and somebody wants to sit in and don't have an extra amp, you both can share a preset. In a band setting, you can actually have 2 guitarists plug into the same Helix, and whoever's controlling the Helix can control the sounds for both themselves and the other person that they're plugged into. So it can be really fun and really cool. I hope this helped give you some ideas about some things that you can possibly do with the Helix. It's really a very, very versatile piece of gear. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. So again, I'll have more videos and tutorials and all kinds of things out in the future. Hope you all have a great day. Thank you again for watching. See you later.